All right, believe it or not, the Western Division is in sight. Welcome into Hawkeyes Live right here at the Voice of College Football. We appreciate everybody being here on another Tuesday night, 5:30 Eastern Time, 4:30 where it counts. And of course, Corey Brad is here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Get on over there. We've got that overlap of football and basketball. So from the Hawkeye of the Storm, the place to be for Iowa football and basketball coverage. Corey, how you doing tonight?
Doing good, Mark. First big Iowa basketball game of the season tomorrow. We got Seton Hall and the Gavitt games on the road out in New Jersey, so that should be a fun one. Pretty big game for Iowa. Yeah, definitely check out the channel. I can't believe we're in this position here. I mean, it's great, right? We're 3 weeks out from the end of the season, and we're talking about Iowa still being in contention for this division. Who would have thought that 3 weeks ago? The division is, of course, down, but you got to give Iowa credit, Kirk Ferentz credit. They've been resilient. The offense has been bad, but the defense has been unbelievable. Special teams has still been really good. We may have found a punt returner, and I mean things are good. You win games, and you're going to quiet the those who are critical, including myself. And right now, I mean, as much as it's fair to be critical of the offense, they're winning games. They've won the last 3.
Absolutely. I would look at it as okay, we've got 5 teams in play. And for anybody that just takes a quick glance at the Big Ten Western Division standings and thinks, okay, well, Wisconsin 3-4, they're only a game back with 2 to play, but they got to climb all these other teams. They can't win. I figured out a path. It's obviously not easy, but it's possible because they've got some tiebreakers that work in their favor. But I would fill in Iowa as the team that I think is most likely to win it because I think they will win their final 2 games of the season, even though they've got a difficult opponent here on the road. Purdue has the 2 easiest games with Northwestern and with Indiana, of course, the old Oak and Bucket Trophy at the end of the year, but they would lose the head-to-head, of course, with Iowa. So all sorts of configurations of the head-to-head sequence, but then also the 3-way tie factor that comes into it that Corey and I were trying to sort out as we recorded our podcast, A Big Ten Paradigm, the other day. But it is intriguing. I think it's a whole lot of fun. I know that the division gets slammed across the nation by college football fans, but I think it's a whole lot of fun to try to figure out and just watch meaningful football the final 2 weeks of the season, not just in one location, like on the other side of the conference, but all over the place.
But it is not a good division.
No, it's not. I expected it to be nearly this fun and chaotic,
Right.
but better, but
Right.
just a little bit better. You know, Iowa beat Iowa State, some of the other out of conference games to go the Big Ten's way, like Wisconsin, Washington State. So for the overall records to be a little bit better, and again, not to be quite this chaotic with the logjam at 4-3, and with, of course, the disadvantage of the games going in the East direction is going to weight down those even Big Ten records in the same division. So that's where we stand.
I think the weird thing about it, Mark, as it relates to the West, is how inconsistent these teams are. I mean, you can talk whatever you want about, overall these teams aren't as good as they are, and that's fine. There's going to be years where teams are down, but typically this division is like Iowa and Wisconsin are the epitomes of consistency, right? I mean, just year in and year out. And I mean, Wisconsin's been weird all year. Of course, they fired Chris midseason. We know Iowa, their offense. I mean, they've been as consistent as anybody. I know you didn't. You weren't terribly surprised by the Michigan State win over Illinois, but that kind of caught me off guard a bit. And now they've lost 2 straight when it looked like they had control. They did have control of this division. Purdue's been really weird. Minnesota's down their quarterback right now. They've lost games that you don't expect them to lose. It's been a weird year as all around. And it's the one year where, one of those Illinois or Nebraska, you could see one of those teams winning the division because everyone else is down, and Illinois is on the verge of blowing that opportunity. Now, if they win out, they're going to win the division, right? I mean, I think that's how the tiebreaker is laid out. It's pretty simple, right? They control their own destiny. Am I correct in that, Mark?
You're saying Minnesota does?
No, Illinois.
If
Third is
Illinois wins
Minnesota.
the final 2, yeah, they would
Yep.
have. Yeah, they have those 2 key tiebreakers against Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. and Purdue.
Yeah, so that's my point. But I don't see them beating Michigan. And frankly, I'll say this: I'm going to release my pick here in a day or two. I don't see Minnesota beating Iowa. I just don't. I mean, I'm not saying they can't, but I just don't know where the offense comes from. Tanner Morgan not expected to play. That could maybe change. We'll have our Minnesota guy on here in a few minutes, but without Morgan, I mean, they don't scare you through the air. And one thing Phil Parker has done, and this is why I believe Phil Parker is the best DC in the country, is heck, he's how many years into his tenure at Iowa? And this year he did something that he hasn't done, or at least hasn't done much. He has stacked the box and sold out against the run. And typically, that's just not a Phil Parker thing to do. Typically, he's not going to put his corners in a predicament where they could give up big plays. And to their credit, they haven't. They gave up one big play against Purdue. It was a deep shot out of the Purdue's end zone to Charlie Jones. And they gave up a touchdown on I believe it was Riley Moss that had coverage in a zone blitz and missed coverage and went for a touchdown. Besides those two big plays, these last two games, Iowa has sold out against the run and they haven't gotten bitten by the opponent. That is impressive on Phil Parker's part. So I expect them to sell out against the run against Minnesota. I mean, why wouldn't you right now? I mean, that might be the number one team in the conference that you'd want to sell out against the run against. So I'd be very surprised if Phil Parker reverts back and he's able to do it. He has the personnel to do it. I don't remember a year where Iowa was as loaded at every single defensive position as they are this year. I give Riley Moss a lot of credit, Mark. I've been critical of him in the past. I thought he was a bit overrated. He won Defensive Back of the Year last year. He's been pretty good. I mean, he has been pretty good. Now, I still don't know his NFL future. Is he a guy who can be a top 3 to 4 round draft pick? Maybe. I'm no draft expert. I still would probably guess that he ends up getting taken 5th or 6th rounds. But he's been good. Cooper DeJean, what a game for him. I mean, if it wasn't for Cooper DeJean, they may not have won Saturday. As convincing as that scoreboard looked, I mean, he returns a big punt inside the 20. He takes one back for a pick 6. He was fantastic. And so we'll see. I think, Minnesota does give you something. They have something at running back that Wisconsin does not have, and that's a cohesive unit. Wisconsin's been up and down all year, although Braylon Allen has gash teams. I mean, go back to the Illinois game when Braylon Allen totaled, 2 yards or something like that on the ground. So we'll see. Minnesota's not played a tough schedule. I was just talking with Don Patterson about this last night, and we talked about it on Monday. Do you realize how bad their schedule is? I mean, I want to talk about. Can we talk about this before we get our Minnesota guy on here? Because it's unbelievable how bad. Just look at their non-conference schedule. And first of all, one of their crossover opponents was Michigan State, who we thought was going to be good, and of course they are not. Their non-conference schedule was New Mexico State, Western Illinois, and Colorado. Now, do you know anything about Western Illinois this year, Mark? Because of course Don, of course, is the winningest coach in Western history. They're 0-10. They're 0-10. Now, New Mexico State. Let me pull up New Mexico while you're showing the viewers this. New Mexico State is an independent. They're 4-5, and you may say, "Well, that's not too bad." New Mexico State has played Nevada. They played UTEP, Hawaii, New Mexico, Lamar, and UMass. I mean, they've played they've played basically 5 of the 10 worst teams in the FBS. I mean, and then an FCS team in Lamar. They've played a nothing schedule and they're 4-5. They're awful. And if you look at total offense right now, let me pull up these numbers because this is obviously somewhat of an indication. New Mexico State is 127 out of 131 FBS teams in total offense. All right. So that's one of the teams that Minnesota has played. I mentioned Western Illinois. They also played Colorado. They are right now in total offense. They're 124 in total offense. So Minnesota's non-conference schedule was a joke. And that's, I mean, you got to believe that, and I look back at some of the numbers, some of their numbers offensively on the ground and certainly defensively, because right now they're a top 10 defense in the country. Some of that was inflated by playing that schedule early. So do I believe that they are? Let me pull up the numbers. I think they're maybe number 6 in the country in total defense right now. Let me pull this up here. Excuse me, number 8. They're number 8. Do I believe they're number 8? Probably not. But they've got a really good secondary, and they've been good throughout the year. But they played a subpar, definitely a subpar non-conference schedule and a subpar Big Ten schedule because one of their crossover games, which was Michigan State, I mean, that's not against a good opponent. The rest of their games have been against the West. They did play Penn State and got handed. All right. They got the pants pulled down against Penn State, Mark. So I just don't know how Minnesota scores against Iowa's D.
So for me, to Minnesota's credit, I think they're a really good defensive team. I put Minnesota and Illinois and Wisconsin in one bucket when it comes to defensive effectiveness. I think that they're not quite as good as their rankings because they run into a lot of bad offenses. And to your point, Minnesota's non-conference schedule. And then on top of that, Colorado is most likely the worst Power 5 team in the nation, and worse than most Group of 5 teams, or 50% of Group of 5 teams. So a really bad Power 5.
So just to recap before you go on, Mark, just sort of recap. Minnesota played the worst, maybe the worst Group of 5 team, one of the 5 worst Group of 5 teams in the country, New Mexico State, and the worst Power 5 team in the country, and maybe the worst FCS team in the country in Western Illinois, who's 0-10. Go on.
Yeah. So the age-old argument, especially with college football, because we just don't see enough games against each other, especially out of conference, is when you look at overall stats, what is that a product of? Well, in Big Ten Western Division circles these days, I think these defensive numbers are bolstered by playing bad offenses. And I think that comes into play mostly for Minnesota, Illinois, and Wisconsin. I think they are really good, sound defensive teams. I think they are top 25 to 30 defensive units. I think they're really good, but their stats say that they're top 5 to 10 units. Iowa, I put in a different category for a couple different reasons, because it doesn't matter who you trot out onto the field with them. They're still going to prove to be one of the best defenses in the country, number one. Number two, they turn defense into offense, unlike these other teams, which is such a random thing for all other defenses. But for Iowa, it's actually so consistent. Not that they can do it every game, because that's just too much to ask, but they do it on a consistent basis that it's obviously part of their defensive prowess and effectiveness. So they're on a different level when it comes to defensive efficiency and effectiveness.
And by the way, I don't know if people remember this, back when Iowa played Rutgers and we were talking, these two terrific defenses. I remember saying, Rutgers defense is good, probably not top 10. I said they're probably top 25, top 30. Well, guess what? They've already moved down to number 21 in the country in total offense. So, but you're right about the West. The West is, those numbers are going to be hurt because you play in the East, right? You're playing Ohio State, you're playing Michigan. I give Iowa's defense credit too, Mark. They have not had a cakewalk out of division schedule. As you know, they've played the two best teams in the conference, not just the division, in the conference, in Ohio State and Michigan. And so, and we've talked about their performance against Ohio State, regardless of points given up. They were terrific in that game defensively. So I just think Tanner Morgan, if he doesn't play, Minnesota's not going to have any confidence in the passing game. They're not going to have much confidence in the passing game if he does play. Let's not forget that Chris Ottman-Bell is out. He would have been a weapon all year had he stayed healthy. And this might have been a division-winning team. I know Steve Dace over at Michigan Podcast predicted Michigan to win the division, and I could see that happening. But at this point, their passing game is a shell of itself. And so, yeah, you're going to get a heavy dose of Ibrahim, and he's been terrific. I mean, I give the guy credit. It's hard to come off of a knee injury like he has and play as well as he has. But again, with Iowa's willingness to sell out against the run, and Phil Parker's trust in the back end of that defense, not just with the two corners, but I mean, heck, Sebastian Castro has been really good. Let's not forget he wasn't a starter heading into the year, and they had Cooper DeJean playing cash, and Sebastian Castro has come in, filled in admirably. You've got Quinn Schulte playing well. You've got Kayvon Merriweather playing well. I mean, if I'm misreading this, you let me know. And again, we're going to talk to our Minnesota guy in a few minutes, but I just don't know how they're going to score.
You mentioned Mo Ibrahim. I don't know that people realize across the nation and even within the Big Ten what a decorated career he has. Just this past weekend in Minnesota's win against Northwestern, Mo Ibrahim had his 18th consecutive 100-yard rushing game. That is the longest streak in college football since 2000. In 22 years, 18 consecutive 100-yard games, and he scored his 50th touchdown. He's only one of 7 players in the history of the conference to score 50 touchdowns. Just a remarkable career by Mo Ibrahim. And he is going to be the Minnesota offense unless they drum up something special for somebody else on Saturday. I don't know what the weather's supposed to be like, but it's going to be on his shoulders as it has been most of the season. We want to remind everyone before we continue here that our Hawkeyes live show here on Tuesday, each and every week, brought to you by the fine people at Gene Arthur Associates. Get on over to Gene Arthur Associates. We'll leave the link in the description section of all the videos. You can find it on all the videos here at the Voice of College Football. Get on over there. And in this day and age of runaway inflation and everything else, if you want to save a few bucks, give it a shot. Get your instant quote on whatever your insurance needs. Also keep in mind that we've got, thanks to Gene Arthur Associates, a ticket giveaway here at Hawkeyes Live for the Nebraska-Iowa showdown on the final weekend of the season. So we will post that information as well. What you need to do there is you go to Facebook, you look up Gene Arthur Associates right there, and you like, comment, and share. Follow their Facebook page, and you're automatically entered into the possibility of coming away with 2 tickets for Iowa and Nebraska. I hope this isn't just semantics, but I will push back on just one evaluation of Iowa versus the rest of the division in terms of being topsy-turvy and inconsistent. I think Iowa's been perfectly consistent throughout the season. Maybe the results haven't.
Yeah.
We're getting the same offense and the same defense every week. Purdue, they, I think, are on the other end of the spectrum. I don't know who's going to show up when they take the field.
No, I agree with you. And that would be the one exception. Iowa has been ultra consistent. I mean, if Iowa loses this weekend, Mark, first of all, they're not going to win the West. All right. You lose this weekend, you're done. And the best you can do is 7-5. You're going to a bowl game either way. They'll go to a bowl game at 6-6. But if you lose this weekend, it's going to be because of the offense, Mark. Like, regardless of what Mo Ibrahim does, I mean, he's not going to come out there and rush for 200. I mean, he may get 100, and I kind of struggle to see that. But boy, those numbers, something's got to give this weekend because Iowa's been holding everybody down, and they've played some good backs here over the last few weeks, and something's got to give. You said how many games? How many straight games has he had 100? 18. Don Patterson said that to me yesterday. 18. I mean, that is an astounding number. He is an NFL back. He's a far more accomplished back than Braylon Allen, and I like Braylon Allen. Let's not forget, too, that Minnesota had a lot of attrition along that offensive line after last season. They had some guys that ended up in the league. So I give Minnesota and PJ Fleck credit. They have rebuilt that offensive line nicely. And, again, to get him back to full strength after that gruesome knee injury last year, credit all around. It is supposed to be very cold. I can tell you that on Saturday. And I don't really know how much that affects me. These guys are going to have hand warmers on the sidelines at every break. I'm sure the quarterbacks will have their little pouch that they can put their hands in. So I don't know what that does to the game. I don't think we're supposed to see Precept up there in Minneapolis. I am not going to the game in Minneapolis, by the way. It crossed my mind for a second back in July, and then I thought, why do I want to go north in the middle of November? And here we are, Mark, here in Ames, 4 inches of snow is on the ground this morning. So I'm good without the trip up north, but weather will be interesting. I will be intrigued to see what the crowd is like on Saturday. I'm assuming it will be full. I'm sure Daniel House can give us an idea of this, but the weather will always be a factor this time of the year.
We take a poll each and every week here at the Voice of College Football on the Iowa channel just to get your thoughts on the winner of the game. And if it's a close game, an expected close matchup, then I will just post, hey, who's going to win the game? if it's an Iowa Northwestern game, for example, I'll post, okay, who's going to be the winner, and then I'll post the point spread as well, just get your thoughts on the point spread as well. And we should do this on a regular basis, is acknowledge everybody's votes here. So we've got just posted here the winner of this Saturday's game, Iowa with 77%, as you would guess, against Minnesota with 162 votes in. We had about double that for last week, with Iowa winning, of course, 24-10 with 78% of the vote there. And before we go to our guests, we want to remind everyone that Hawkeyes Live is brought to you by Gene Arthur Associates. The link is in the description section of all the videos to get your instant quote. You could save some money. So grab that link, and then also consider our ticket giveaway for the Hawkeyes and the Huskers. Final day of the season. Go to Gene Arthur Associates on Instagram and Facebook. Like, follow, and share there, and you're automatically entered. All right, let's bring in our guy, Daniel House, Gophers Guru. Daniel, it's good to see you today.
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Doing
looking
well.
Forward
doing
to,
well.
Looking forward to hearing your expertise, Daniel.
No, I'm excited about this game. I've been doing a lot of studying on Iowa, and so I feel like I got a pretty good feel for both teams.
I'm going to take some of Corey's breakdown when we talked a little Minnesota, and I'm going to serve it up to you, Daniel, because to be blunt, it's difficult to evaluate how good this football team is when they've played a couple really good football teams, I would say, in going on the road against Penn State. And of course, they had the Tanner Morgan issue thrown in their face and had to go to the redshirt freshman there. Illinois is a really good team, but showing their flaws the last few weeks. So Minnesota looks good, especially on the defensive side of the ball in all the national metrics. But really, how good is this team against probably the worst schedule in the Big Ten?
Well, I would say the biggest thing with Minnesota is just the passing game, being able to find something in that area. And it's been, an issue throughout the season. I think I was on here before the season started and was talking about Chris Ottman-Bell's value. And when Chris Ottman-Bell went down, Minnesota needed other receivers to step up. And Dalen Wright was someone who people, thought would burst onto the scene. I mean, you're at practices and he was flashing a lot and then just never really clicked. And Mike Brown-Stevens has been inconsistent out of the slot. I mean, Daniel Jackson's been their best receiver, but a lot of teams during that stretch, Purdue, Illinois, Penn State, those 3 games they lost in a row, were taking the approach of stacking the box with man coverage, just forcing Minnesota's receivers to get open, taking away the run game. And that's kind of been the recipe for success while playing Minnesota. So you look at this game and you go, Minnesota has to be able to pass the football. The Rutgers game, this past game against Northwestern, the formula was just be more physical up front and, run the football, and Mo just dominating. Where now in these type of games, you're going to have to get stuff done through the passing game. When you look at Iowa's expected points added per play, second and on first down, number 1 on second down defensively. So early down defense is so good. Minnesota, they cannot get behind the sticks in this game.
And one thing, Daniel, I know you're not just a, I know your website is Gophers Guru, but you're a Big Ten guy. I mean, you follow the sport far and wide. If you've been following Iowa since the bye week, and Mark and I have talked about this extensively, Phil Parker has done something he doesn't normally do. I mean, he's stacked the box. He's sold out to stop the run. And if you're going to do that against anybody in the Big Ten, it's probably Minnesota. Go ahead.
Yeah, I really like the defensive backs that Iowa has. I was intrigued while watching film on Sebastian Castro. I thought he played very well, a fluid mover, somebody inside that has emerged when I was watching the film, along with Moss and Cooper DeJean, who I think is going to end up, when all is said and done, he's going to be one of the best cornerbacks in the nation. Like, you just watch his athletic ability, his instincts, and then also seeing what he can do in the return game. That could be a huge factor in this one as well. When you look at field position, both teams being within a yard and average field position margin, both teams have value that. Iowa special teams is a huge factor. So, when you're looking at a close game, cold weather, defensive battle. That's what I think I'm most excited about in this game, guys, is Joe Rossi versus Phil Parker. Like, two very good defensive minds that I have a lot of respect for studying. I think you're right that I was doing some things defensively that you wouldn't typically see. I was noting that as well while watching them, because they have trust in their defensive backs, and their pass rush. They got a lot of guys that can rotate up there. Like, I was looking at Lucas Van Ness going, man, like the versatility of this guy. You can kick him inside, you can play out of different alignments, like 34% pass rush win rate. So I like a lot of the elements of Iowa's defense, and so I'm interested to see what the scheme is like. But I have a hunch it will be, stacking that box.
But Daniel, and this is something that Coach Patterson said to me, because I
Mm-hmm.
said the same thing. Phil obviously has trust in Riley Moss and Cooper DeJean and Kayvon Merriweather. You mentioned
Mm-hmm.
Sebastian Castro, Quinn Schulte. I think the other part of this, and he brought this to my attention, and I think he's absolutely right. It may be more of a product of Phil recognizes that they have no room for error on defense.
That's true.
We all know the offensive struggles last year, and we know it got worse. So, if anything, Phil deserves. We can hike his salary up as much as possible, and I won't complain about it, because the guy has just been unbelievable in spite of the circumstances. Now, Mo Ibrahim, as Mark mentioned this before he jumped on, Mo has gained 100 yards in 18 straight games.
Yeah.
Iowa's played some good running backs here since the bye. And they haven't had, including a couple guys for Ohio State. I just don't know how. Something's got to give here. What is the key here for Minnesota to find a way to run against this Iowa D?
Yeah, it's been creative. Minnesota's had to come up with some wrinkles to be able to run the football. You look at the Nebraska game, Nebraska overloading the front a lot because they knew they were running outside zone. So Minnesota tightened things up, bunch inside, got the receivers out, blocking, getting good angles by tightening things up. And then you look at the Northwestern game, doing some stuff with the running back shifting right before the play to kind of mess with the defense's identification and not allow them, make them have to shift and adjust and prevent that overload. So Minnesota, the last 3 weeks, has been adding little wrinkles to its rushing scheme that are subtle details that have helped them be able to run the ball. And I thought last week they're a very athletic offensive line, but PJ Fleck and the offensive staff talked a lot about pad level being lower, getting off the ball. Last week I thought was the best performance that they've had, just cohesively, everyone playing with lower pad level. And I believe that the offensive line maybe played one of its better games last week from top to bottom. So, you were mentioning Phil Parker earlier. You look at like opponent explosiveness, number one in the nation, number one in opponent passing downs explosiveness, like limiting the big play. And it's even more impressive because the offense isn't sustaining anything. They're not being efficient there. So your defense has got so much pressure on you. But it's been like really good coverage disguises, mixing things up, confusing the quarterback. I was impressed while watching it.
Yeah, and let's remember, I got into it with someone a couple days ago. Mark, somebody was trying to tell me that we got to give Iowa's defense credit for Iowa's offense credit for the 24 points it scored. Let's not forget that Iowa blocked a punt that put the Iowa offense inside the 20.
Yep.
Then they had a punt return by Cooper DeJean that put them inside the 20. And then they had a pick six from Cooper DeJean. Now, I give Iowa's offense credit because, as we all know here, it's harder to move the ball once you're in the red zone. And they did get in. They scored each time. Iowa, 146 in total offense this past week. They've moved back down nationally in the rankings. I do believe what we saw against Northwest. I know Kirk painted it today like, well, we took 2 steps forward and 1 step back with our last 2 games, Northwestern and Purdue. We've talked about this. Northwestern's defense is a train wreck. Purdue's secondary has been a train wreck. I didn't catch all of the Illinois game on Saturday, but it was terrible in that game against Iowa 2 weeks ago, Daniel.
Yeah.
Minnesota's that was a question today at the press conference. How does Iowa deal with this Minnesota secondary, which has been really efficient and has produced pros? And I'm guessing there are pros on this roster as well. So how does Iowa This is a loaded question, I know. How does Iowa throw against the Minnesota secondary?
Yeah, well, I was looking at that. I was like, okay, Iowa's rushing offense being inefficient like they are, like 21% of their rushing attempts are stopped at or behind the line of scrimmage. That's like the 13th highest rate in FBS. So that's hurting them a lot because they're getting in passing down situations. And that's the matchup that I'm watching in this game. Minnesota has done a nice job defensively on first and second down and is playing the run well, top 20 rush defense in terms of expected points added per play. So what I'm looking at is Minnesota. The Hawkeyes offense gets into passing down situations at like a 35% clip, which is the 17th highest rate in the FBS. They have the second worst success rate in the FBS in those situations. And Minnesota's defense is a top 10 defense in passing down situations. So the key is if Minnesota is able to stop the run, which I think that's been a strength of this team, and they've had a lot of success there. They can be creative within the passing down situations. I was looking at what Jim Leonard did against Iowa last week. A lot of simulated pressures where you're dropping an edge and sending a second or third level defender as the fourth rusher. So you're not blitzing, but you're sort of simulating pressure, I guess is how you would describe it. So I saw a lot of simulated pressures, which is something that Minnesota really likes to do as well. So I watch Iowa's offensive line and I go, wow, I think there's a lot of opportunities to hit with simulated pressures and blitzes, especially when there's slide and four-man slide protections, which that's where Minnesota and Joe Rossi are at their best, is in passing down situations. So Iowa has to be efficient on first and second down in this game. And I would say just try to stay ahead of the sticks with the quick passing game if they want to score points on Minnesota's defense, because I think it's going to come down to who plays better up front on both sides of the ball.
And Mark, I know I had somebody else that said, well, you made your prediction. I predicted Wisconsin 17, Iowa 10 last week. And so, well, you didn't account for Iowa's defense to score the points they scored. How do you account for that? How do you anticipate pick sixes? And I mean, you just can't. I mean, you understand. I think it's my prediction this week, and I haven't come out with my official prediction, Daniel. I think it's first one to 10. Frankly, I just, now special teams and pick sixes and scoop and scores, those can change things. But I would say the same thing as last week. I don't know how either of these teams consistently move the ball against the other. And you talked about those run numbers, those run offense numbers for Iowa. We're 2 weeks. We're just a little over a week removed from a 200-yard ground game from Caleb Johnson.
And I was surprised as well with Caleb Johnson's usage. Like I thought for sure his total attempts and snap share would be higher than it was. Like you look at all the advanced stats and you watch the games, he had 14 missed tackles forced against Purdue, ranks 5th among Big Ten backs in yards after contact per attempt, and is 3rd in elusiveness rating among Big Ten backs on the PFF elusiveness grade. So I'm like, I've been impressed watching him play. I thought for sure that he would have a larger snap share.
I agree. Well, again, I know I've said this before. Purdue did not want to be there. I mean, I've never seen, and Don said the same thing. Yeah. I mean, their non-willingness to make tackles in that game, Mark. I mean,
they were playing for the Western Division. I don't know how they didn't want to be there. That's crazy.
Well, just go back and watch. I mean, Daniel, I think you know what I'm talking about. They didn't look like they even wanted to make tackles out there. And our guy Grant Michael, the big time boiler, he told us that leading up into the game. I give him credit. He said, I am extremely concerned about this Purdue secondary. It's dealing with attrition. We've got issues in the locker room. And I agree with you. I don't know now they did bounce back, but my biggest look against that team in person again in West Lafayette was a secondary that did not want to be there. So my point is, the run game is what it is. I don't think you read into that one game against a really bad Purdue defense and assume that's going to become the norm. But you're right. A little bit odd. I think I'd have to look back. Maybe I don't even know if he had 4 carries in that first quarter. Iowa came out with Gavin and LaShawn Williams in the first quarter and kind of ran to start. I don't know if that's trying to please Gavin's a local kid who Kirk loves, raves about his leadership. And is trying to get him involved. But boy, that is an odd time to do that a week removed from the performance that we saw from Caleb Johnson. Mark, do you have anything to add on this?
Well, we'll catch up with this super chat. Then I've got a two-parter for Daniel. Erica, thank you so much for the super chat contribution. This one directed right at you, Corey. So Corey mentioned a podcast interview with LeVar. Can you please post it to the channel? Also, will you be doing a video on who would be next coach?
Yes. You mentioned a podcast interview with LeVar. I mentioned a podcast interview with LeVar. I don't know what that is. I don't know that I ever mentioned that. I've never had LeVar on my podcast. That's the comment. As it relates to who the next head coach will be, I plan on discussing that more. We've talked about that in the past, Mark, but we'll talk more about that. I think heading into the offseason. I think it's a better offseason topic.
Absolutely. Thank you, Erica. So, Daniel, if we go back to the Minnesota offense, I'm curious to hear your evaluation of Ethan Kaliakmanis. One thing would be, as we phrase this, have they changed their offensive approach, number one, with a redshirt freshman quarterback versus what they were doing versus Tanner Morgan? My second part to the question is he supposed to be the next guy? Is he supposed to be the guy that they're grooming to be the starter for this team?
Stylistically, nothing has changed too much. Minnesota has heavily run the football. I mean, that's their approach philosophically with how they do things. And I would say just the biggest thing is last week there were just a couple of misplays out there. You know, there's one instance where a receiver broke open and just ball wasn't placed in the perfect spot, and then another rep where that happened over the middle. That if you hit on those two plays, you probably have a couple explosives through the air. But I think stylistically they're doing a lot of the same things that they did. Ethan's been more incorporated as a runner as well, so you might see some more like being able to keep off zone read and put some stress on the defense in that area. But the staff is excited about Ethan's developmental potential. Like he's learning on the fly, getting used to everything. That's why I'd say like Phil Parker's scheme will probably be a lot of, disguising, which he already does a ton of, but like being able to mix it up and try to get, bait Minnesota, Ethan Kaliakmanis into interception if Tanner's unable to go. Like trying to keep Minnesota from being able to effectively read the coverages and stop the run. I mean, big picture wise, there's not too much of a change offensively with Ethan Kaliakmanis, though. They're running the same offense that they typically do, just maybe a little bit more quarterback run possibility.
All right, Corey, anything else for Daniel?
Enjoy the weather. What's the press box like at the stadium? Is it? I'm assuming it's. Oh, that's a stupid question. Of course, it's heated. You're up in Minneapolis, but I'm assuming that they take care of the media up there with hot chocolate and warm food on a Saturday.
Yeah, you get your media buffet before the game, cookies at halftime. It used to be Dairy Queen. They had a sponsorship deal with Dairy Queen, so you get the dilly bars at halftime. Now you don't get the dilly bars, so that's unfortunate. We get cookies instead, but yeah, it should be a cold one. I mean, that plays into it as well. Like I'm thinking it'll be about 10 degrees and windy, so that plays into special teams and how the coaches approach that stuff. But this is going to be a game where it will be decided up front. I want to see how Minnesota's O-line handles Iowa's D-line and how Iowa's O-line handles Minnesota's front when Rossi gets creative up there, because I see a lot of opportunity. Like I was looking at the one matchup, center Logan Jones. I feel like Minnesota will come up with some ways to try to scheme up some mismatches against him. Just looking both at the numbers in the film, I was amazed that no Big Ten center has been credited with a higher pressure responsibility percentage than Logan Jones this season in the Big Ten. So it's interesting how that could potentially be a matchup that Minnesota exploits, maybe with some double A gap pressure and stuff. But I'm excited to see Phil Parker and Rossi go at it, because they're two great defensive minds.
And Daniel, my condolences. I did watch Minnesota DePaul last night, and boy, the barn was it as empty as it? I don't know if you were there. Was it as empty as it looked?
There wasn't a big crowd. I was not there, but I did watch it as well. And Minnesota could not shoot the basketball. That's going to be a problem this season. They're very young. They got some upside, but it's going to be a a long season, I think, with some flashes. It's investment basketball.
Well, Dawson Garcia is a guy that Iowa had went after hard out of high school, so I'm intrigued
Yeah.
to see what he does. Mark,
Yeah,
that's
I
all
mean,
I got. If you
Jamison Battle's out right now, so
right,
that's
battle
certainly,
coming back will help
yeah.
immensely.
Corey does his best to sneak some basketball conversation in, even though I outlaw it. But that being said, I'll take it a different direction. You've probably worked overtime this week, Daniel, breaking down that Vikings Bills film.
Oh
That was
yes,
crazy.
that was a heck of a game. I enjoyed watching it. Like all the crazy plays that happened. You know, Jefferson on 4th and 18. I don't know how he caught that. And then you got the just craziness of Josh Allen fumbling the ball at the 1, recovering, and it was just back and forth. And the Minnesota just they play so much better in those pivotal moments where you need to make the winning play. All the 1-score games that they lost last season, now they're winning those 1-score games because they're able to manage a game and make the schematic tweaks and hit on the big plays when they need to. And the confidence level of the team's way better. I think like earlier in the season, you saw them trying to learn a new defensive scheme with all the zone concepts and the zone matching and, just communicating. Now it seems like they're starting to hit a stride here, and the offense is taking some more chances downfield out of the bye week. So yeah, the Vikings, I'm excited to see the next few weeks here because Dallas now at home. Vikings have a lot of home games coming up as well. So I think that probably serves them well as they enter the back half of the season.
Maybe we've seen our Super Bowl matchup. Daniel, let folks know where they can find you.
You can check out my work at gophersguru.com. The $5 a month subscription package gets you access to all the content.
Daniel, thank you so much. We appreciate you being here, as always.
It's always fun, guys. I love chatting with you.
Thank you, Daniel.
There it is, the breakdown. Minnesota, Iowa.
He is the man, Mark. He is the man for Minnesota football.
I don't know how this guy gets around to all the various teams and breakdowns because, again, you heard the basketball, you heard the NFL. He's an NFL guy, maybe first and foremost. He breaks all that down.
And the Vikings are having one heck of a season. So,
absolutely.
No, it's gonna be intriguing. I'd love to be there, and part of me would love to be there, but the cold is just the cold will keep me away this weekend. I do wonder how that will affect the passing game because I mentioned they're going to have they're going to have hand warmers on the sidelines and whatnot, but this is a young quarterback that hasn't played a lot, and somebody pointed this out to me earlier today. Well, he's a mobile guy. Well, okay, he ran for 28 yards after sack. I don't know how many sacks Northwestern had, but 28 yards.
I can't imagine Northwestern had many sacks.
I can't either. But my point is, we have not seen him. I'm guessing that Northwestern didn't get him in too many obvious passing situations where he's forced to make a play with his feet. So, as Daniel brought out, early down success on defense will be key. If you can get them behind the chains, because Minnesota plays like Iowa wants to play. You want to stay ahead in the chains. Iowa's been terrible at doing that, but that's what you want to do if you're Iowa. Mark, I feel like we should probably address the Caden Proctor situation. It maybe these last few minutes. I don't know if that's okay with you, but
absolutely. Although I'm not understanding of it or knowledgeable about it. So
well, Caden Proctor obviously committed to Iowa. Nobody needs me to tell them that, but he visited Oregon over the weekend. I'll be upright or forthright with everybody. I spoke with someone in his circle on Saturday during the game who told me, look, he's just double checking, making sure he made the right decision. His future is what's important. We just want to make everything certain. I was told the visit had already been scheduled prior to him visiting and prior to his commitment. And so during the post-game show on Saturday, I basically said, look, I'm not that worried about it at this point. I can tell you it's been crickets since then. All right. That's all I'll say. It's been crickets since then from his circle, from his box, so to speak. So take that for what you may. There are rumors that NIL is becoming a factor. Again, I can't confirm any of that because I've not heard that from the source. But the information I was told on Saturday was that, it basically indicated to me that it's not time to panic yet. But as you know, Kyler Casper is a guy Iowa lost to Oregon, not just because of the offense, but I think in large part due to NIL. So will I be shocked if Caden Proctor flips? I won't. I'll be severely disappointed. But money talks, Mark. And when he made the decision months ago, we said, wow, this kid turned down. I mean, he basically told the local TV station here in Central Iowa, I had programs offering me $500,000, $1 million. And he basically said, I just didn't care to turn it down. I want to play in the pros and make money. But Mark, that's a lot of money. And a big guy like that,
play in the pros by going to any of those schools.
I know. And a big guy like that blows out his knee at Iowa.
Yeah.
It's too bad that college football has gotten to this point.
Yes.
NIL is a great thing, but it's been abused and manipulated. And I have a hard time blaming a kid for doing that, because I think of myself, if I was in that position, I reflect back to being 17, 18 years old, and somebody's saying, hey, you can either play here and have a shot at the league, or play here and have the shot at the league, but over here you're going to get $500 million right away, or $500,000 right away. That's a lot. Mark, is that a lot of money?
I'd make that decision today. Why
would
you not make that decision unless you really didn't like the coaching staff, the campus, everything involved over there?
But he made that decision. He committed. And I'm not saying it's a fake commitment by doing this, but I'm just saying, then he's going to visit the other schools. So it is, I can see why people are concerned about that. And I've not talked about it. I've not produced a segment on my channel. I've kind of been waiting because I wanted to give his family an opportunity to kind of respond, because they've been the ones that have spoken in behalf of Caden, which I respect. I mean, Caden is, he's 6'8", 330 pounds. He's still a kid. So I've tried to respect that, but it's out there, and there are just rumors circulating, and he was at the Oregon game on Saturday wearing an Oregon Duck shirt.
The other part in this, though, would be that while there's $500,000, $1 million, whatever the figure on the table elsewhere, that doesn't mean that's compared to zero at Iowa. There have to be.
Well, I'd like to know.
Not on the table right this second. There are opportunities.
Yeah, but the opportunities are different than, basically signing and being told, here is cash in hand.
Yes.
You and I both know that he's not getting guarantees of commercials that he can do for the local car dealership out there. He's getting paid by boosters. I mean, that's just what it is.
The abuse that you speak of.
Yeah, exactly.
That's against the rules. That's against the rules.
Well,
now,
it's happening everywhere.
Yeah, it's happening everywhere. And I have no issue with a coach and a program and a coaching staff outlining that we have these athletes on the roster right now, and they are currently benefiting in these ways, and we have these types of connections. But that's where it ends in terms of anything being set in stone, agreed upon. That's all against the rules.
And what I've been saying since day one, when all this stuff started, we can say it's against the rules, Mark, but is it really? I mean, the NCAA has said you're not supposed to do this, but there's no enforcement. So, and the premise of NIL is positive and good.
Yes.
But in the very essence of NIL is also, we can't control what players do. We can't control what donors do. And you like that, in and of itself. But my point is, and some of this, is filtering through Oregon, filtering through these different schools. But I've said this for a long time. What would stop a donor, a big donor outside of Iowa City, say up in North Liberty, from calling a recruit who just visited and said, and basically saying, hey, I got a check with $200,000 written on it in your name if you commit and sign, and you'll get it in December? How can the NCAA has washed their hands of this, but how can anybody regulate that under the premise of what the Supreme Court ruled about NIL?
Well, they can do it the same way that there was cheating before NIL, and that it was probably rarely caught, but it was caught, because I am guessing as we go forward with this, that there are going to be certain coaches and institutions that are going to turn in other ones because players are going to talk, people are going to talk, and people, of course, in the coaching ranks move from team to team and school to school. And there's going to be evidence of there was an agreement made not after December 15th, but in September. And here's the documentation, here's the screenshot, here's the whatever. And that's going to start at some point, I would guess.
But I have said, and I'm not an advocate for breaking the rules, and people in the chat may not agree with this, but as long as it's being allowed, all right? As long as it's being allowed and there are loopholes and it's not unethical, and you may not like it, but as long as it's not violating the rules per se, Iowa has to get with the program on this. And yes, they have these collectives. They have the Swarm Collective, and they have another NIL group, right, that's taking care of these players. That obviously cannot compete with Oregon. And I'm not saying they'll ever be able to compete with an Oregon or Texas A&M. But you have to figure out a way to produce extra incentive for recruits. Do I like it? I don't. I don't want NIL to become an incentive for recruiting. But Mark, if I told you how many big men Iowa basketball head coach Fran McCaffrey went after in the offseason, and several of them, I can tell you with a certainty, chose other schools because of NIL. And Iowa was slow to get the collective in place. They've got it in place now, but I just don't think it compares to some of these individualized NIL deals or packages that these recruits are getting. And you and I both know, Caden Proctor committed months ago. I guarantee you he's been getting offers and phone calls relentlessly since then. So I would hate for him to decommit. I don't have any reason to think he's going to, other than the fact that he has obviously not shut it down at this point. We still got a month from until signing day. But the bottom line is, flashing forward, I just can't imagine blaming him. And some Hawkeye fans may not like that. I put yourself in that position. And as bad as it is, and as unfortunate as it is, either blame Iowa for not having incentives in place or blame the structure for allowing this and not being able to regulate this. It's got to be one of the two.
So let's say that he has been offered and the money's on the table, and it is, let's say it's a legitimate NIL and it's not something that's just handed to him, but it's there's a reciprocation of some kind of product and service, that sort of thing. And it is what it's supposed to be, but it's just not at the time that it's allowed by the rules. This is something that I was going to have to counter. Nebraska is known to be one of the better NIL collectives in the Big Ten right now. And they're operating as such.
That doesn't surprise me. There's wealthy people around Omaha, right? I mean, there's Nebraska football is a religion. I get that. The problem with, I'm not trying to debate you on this, Mark, but the problem with what you just said, if it's set up to where there's basically a service done by the athlete to receive NIL funding, how do you regulate what's adequate? Do you put a cap on this stuff? Can you do that? Can you cap these things?
No.
So what's stopping the local heating and air conditioning company from having a donor basically give this company money and say, look, we'll give you this money. You cut a 30-second commercial with Caden Proctor, and it's $500,000 to cut a 30-second commercial. You're telling me that would fix the problem? I don't think that fixes the problem at all. I mean, because you can manipulate it as much as you want, it's still going to be pay for play.
Well, we have laws all over the place that can be manipulated.
Well, that's easily manipulated.
But we're talking about allowing these student athletes to have the same rights as any other American. So again, I agree with you that the way it's being conducted is not good. It's not good for the sport collectively. It's not even good. Maybe at some point we will see down the road for the athletes themselves to some degree. But that's the freedom that the rest of us have.
Well,
So yes,
it's
it's going to be
also
manipulated to say, is that fair work for the return? Of course it's not, but we are basically getting around just flat out giving you money by making you do something. Throw up a few Instagram posts and there's your $500,000. But
exactly.
how can that be regulated to say what is fair return on?
But my point is, what's the difference, Mark? What's the difference of somebody just saying, let's give the kid 500, this donor's going to give the kid 500 million if he signs, and let's give the kid 500 million if he signs, oh, and he can throw up a post. I
Because
mean,
we do see legitimate NIL agreements out there where there are companies that are paying athletes and they're pushing product.
well, I understand that, but I'm just saying the deals at the top with the best of the best, the rich, as it relates to college football, I just don't see a way that the rich aren't going to continue to get richer, because the ones that can throw this type of money, they're always going to have a way around it. As long as NIL is in place as it is, there's always going to be a way around it.
And so maybe there's no issue for an Iowa because Iowa's not competing for national championships. And I'm asked this question all the time in terms of who's going to benefit from NIL and who's going to be hurt by the NIL. And my thought is there's also always outliers, meaning there's always going to be a school or two or three that for some reason they're going to take more advantage of this than teams or programs at their level, and others will fall back. But by and large, 90% of the time, I got to think the same schools that pre-NIL had the boosters that would pony up for the private flights for recruiting and ridiculous huge amounts of analysts and support staff and great and grand facilities and all the money that's funneled into all the programs we could list off like that. Why wouldn't they be the same people that are going to fund NIL? So I don't see much of a change in the power structure of college football because of that.
All I can say as it relates to Iowa is this will ensure that Iowa never becomes a force. Any fan that believes in some crazy world that Iowa can become a power, the rule as the structure of NIL as it currently stands, and the structure of NIL in every scenario I can imagine, unless you start really regulating what exactly is NIL, and then you take away what you just got done saying, freedom. They're not like any other person in this world. I think you ensure that Iowa will never be able to become consistently elite. And maybe they wouldn't be able to anyways because of where they're. I don't believe that's the case. And Nebraska proved in the 90s that it's possible to be in this region and in this climate and be elite and sustain that. But I just think it's if this happens, we're going to all get a wake up call to this if we haven't already.
My only answer to every concern that you just raised in regards to can this be capped and can this be regulated and can this be distributed more in an even way for better competition would be for college football to incorporate. For college football to incorporate itself, just like it's an NFL, it's a Major League Baseball, it's a professional league, and then they can start to make decisions that are good for the sport and not every conference and every school just making decisions for its own benefit. And then there can be a cap placed on it, just like, the Green Bay Packers can't just pay one of their players, Aaron Rodgers, whatever they want to pay him. They've got to stay within a salary cap because their revenue is coming from the NFL. And the revenue for each team is tied directly to how much revenue is being brought in. So it's regulated. So if the NFL starts to make less money next season, well, the salary cap's going to come down because it's all regulated so that you run a healthy business. Well, if college football wants to get in the business of that, they can all come together and say, you know what? Iowa's got $3 million for NIL for players, just like Wisconsin, just like Nebraska, and everybody's got $3 million because this is what the whole of college football takes in terms of revenue. But there's going to have to be a lot of organization, and somebody's really going to have to take a leadership role to get all the conferences to come together and pull in one direction.
And I think that the one out that teams like Iowa may have is the fact that they're a member of the Big Ten. Because, and I'm not saying that these other conferences won't be able to follow suit, but for instance, this TV deal that we basically been told by Kevin Warren, the door has opened now for players to get paid. What that exactly looks like from the university conference side of things, we'll see. But that might be the one advantage down the line where there's so much money, and not that there hasn't always been, but now there's more money than there ever has been from these TV deals, where you're almost forced to share it with the players, and that may even the playing field to some extent with schools and other conferences that are still using NIL in this way. And guaranteed there's going to be players that would rather than flirt with an NIL deal that could get them in trouble or is, at a school where they don't have the track record of producing pros like in Iowa. Perhaps you go with what that's still significant, right? Due to the TV deal, the money that it could potentially be on the table. You perhaps go with the safer choice there. I think that could still occur. And Caden Proctor did come in and give the kid credit. I guarantee you he ain't lying that he had 6 figures on the table. Now the million, I don't know, maybe he did. But he did commit to Iowa. So I have to think that in his heart of hearts, at the time when he committed, he believed that was his best. You don't just commit to Iowa with all this money on the table unless you actually believe in that moment, this is what I want to do. But we should have known this is going to happen, that there would be other schools pushing for him until signing day and after signing day. Mark, the signing day doesn't end anything. Orlando Trader, and I know he's not a 5-star recruit, but Orlando Trader committed to Iowa, signed, and then earlier this year got a release. And guess what? If a player doesn't get granted a release, if Kirk Ferentz, if the administration at Iowa wants to be petty and say, we're not going to release you, he'll just enter the transfer portal. That's all he's got to do. Enter the transfer portal. And he'll get to transfer wherever he wants for free anyways. And then if he wants to do it a second time, he'll probably get a waiver. I mean, it's the whole idea of we get him to signing day and then it's over. That is baloney. Not in this era with NIL, with the transfer portal, with how the NCAA is granting waivers. So what does John Rothstein, the college basketball guy, say? The NCAA hands out waivers like, what do they say? Moms hand out seedless watermelon on a summer day or something weird like that. But it is true. I mean, these waivers are being granted left and right, and I don't see the end in sight.
Erica, thank you so much for the Super Chat contributions. And if it wasn't for Jean Arthur Associates, Erica, we would say that you have sponsored tonight's show. So thank you so much for these Super Chat contributions. But in fact, we've got Jean Arthur Associates, and they've been kind enough to provide a ticket giveaway, Iowa, Nebraska football ticket giveaway. Again, follow them, like, share, and follow on Facebook and Instagram, Jean Arthur Associates. It's so easy to find. I do it all the time. Facebook, boom, Jean Arthur Associates. Take you right to their page. Follow, share, and like right there. Instagram as well. And you are automatically enrolled to see the Hawkeyes and the Huskers get it on, and maybe Iowa playing for another berth in the Big Ten championship game. How about that?
Mark, I'll just say one challenge to Erica. Erica, get into basketball. That's my challenge to Erica. She's an avid supporter of this show and in football. I know she's said in the past that she doesn't follow basketball. That's my challenge to Erica. Give basketball a shot. And by the way, Chicago, she lives in Chicago. She said that before. Chicago's a great basketball city, Mark, as you know. Great basketball city.
Great baseball city, too.
It's a great sports city. It's a great sports city.
It is
right?
A great sports city.
I was just at Wrigley Field for the first time the other day, Mark.
Oh, nice.
Didn't go inside, unfortunately, but they were actually replacing the lights. They had a helicopter, and it's a weird thing. I've never seen anything like it. They had a helicopter literally balancing this mega light, installing new lights in the stadium.
Interesting. I'll put it this way, Erica. As somebody threw me this slogan that we may tag along with the Voice of College Football, where football never stops. In addition to joining Corey on, of course, from the Hawkeye of the Storm for basketball season, football does never stop here at the Voice of College Football, even into the off season. So
absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate the time as always, sir.
Thank you, Corey. Always appreciate it. Should be an interesting one. I can't believe we didn't get into this, but I can't believe that Minnesota's a 3-point favorite. I understand they're at home. I don't see it. I think it's going to be a really good game. I don't see Iowa blowing them out, but
Vegas knows more than we do. I'll say
yeah,
that.
I think this is in the 17-10 range for Iowa, something like that. All right, Corey. Thank you so much.
I'll talk to you soon, Mark.